Listen, I'm about to tell you a story that will absolutely shock you. It's about a woman who discovered that sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming or crying. It's simply showing the world the truth through numbers. My name is Jasmine, and I just won the most important battle of my life. But it didn't happen the way you'd expect. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation in the moment. There was something far more powerful. There was evidence. Cold, irrefutable, mathematical evidence. For 7 years, I was married to a man named David. 7 years of what I thought was a partnership. What I didn't know was that I was living a lie so complete, so calculated that even I, a woman trained to see through numbers, almost missed it. David was successful, or at least that's what everyone believed. He worked in corporate sales at a major technology firm. He wore expensive suits. He drove a luxury car that he said was for client entertainment. He came home late, always with stories about important meetings and demanding clients. I was the quiet one, the accountant. I worked from home handling freelance auditing and bookkeeping projects. I cooked dinner. I maintained the house. I did what I thought a supportive wife should do, and I stayed blind. The thing about being an accountant is that you're trained to see patterns, to understand cash flow, to recognize when numbers don't add up. But sometimes the people we love are the last ones we want to investigate. So we don't. We make excuses. We rationalize. We believe the stories because believing is easier than the truth. That changed on a Tuesday evening in November. I was preparing David's best suit for dry cleaning. It was something I did regularly, a small gesture to show I cared about him, about his success. As I reached into the inner pocket to check for forgotten items, my fingers found a piece of thick paper. A receipt from a jewelry store called Luminaire Jewels. The kind of place that doesn't have prices in the window because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I unfolded the paper and read the details with the same clinical eye I'd trained myself to use on financial documents for 15 years. The date was yesterday. The time was 2:30 in the afternoon. The item purchased, one gold bracelet with topaz gemstones and diamond accents. The price, $5,400. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted, like a wheel clicking into a new gear, because I remembered yesterday afternoon. I remembered David's text message. Stuck in meetings all day, he'd written, "Crucial client negotiations, don't wait for me." But David hadn't been in meetings. David had been shopping for jewelry, expensive jewelry, the kind of bracelet that didn't come in a small box he could hide in his pocket, the kind of bracelet he'd wear on someone else's wrist. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I didn't throw the receipt in his face or demand explanations. Instead, I did what I do best. I opened my laptop and I started looking. It took me 20 minutes to find her. Her name was Sophia. She was 25 years old. She worked as an executive assistant at David's company. Her Instagram profile was public, and her last post from yesterday evening showed a perfectly manicured hand holding a champagne glass, with a gold bracelet glinting on the wrist. The caption read, "When someone truly appreciates you. Best night of my life." The geotag showed the location was the same restaurant where David had proposed to me 5 years ago. In that same spot, he'd told me he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I lay in the dark next to my sleeping husband, and I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg him to explain. Instead, I was going to do something far more devastating. I was going to find the truth, all of it, every number, every transaction, every lie carefully hidden in the financial structures of our life together, and then I was going to present it to a judge. For the next 3 months, I became someone else. On the surface, I was still the same wife. I cooked his dinners. I asked about his day. I played the part of a woman who didn't know her entire marriage was built on infidelity and deceit. But at night, after he fell asleep, I transformed into an investigator. I had legitimate access to our financial accounts. We had done our taxes jointly for 7 years. All our accounts were linked. David had never bothered to hide his activities because he never thought I'd look. He never thought the quiet accountant would actually use her skills against him. I created a spreadsheet I named Balance Sheet of Truth. I divided it into sections: real estate, income streams, hidden expenses, gambling losses, the mistress, everything. First, I researched the house. We'd bought it 12 years ago before we were married. I found the original mortgage documents. David liked to say he'd paid for everything, that I contributed nothing. But the down payment had come from somewhere, and I knew exactly where. My grandmother had died when I was 28. She'd left me an inheritance of $220,000. I'd transferred it to David's account because he'd insisted it would be easier that way. One transaction. One account. Simple and convenient, he'd said. What he didn't know was that I'd never actually merged our finances. I'd kept meticulous records. Every deposit he made from my inheritance was documented in our original mortgage statements. Every payment I made toward the house note was recorded with a memo line that said exactly what it was for. I printed those documents. I certified them through a notary. I created a timeline that would make any accountant weep with joy. Then I started digging deeper. David's salary was $160,000 a year. That's what he'd listed on the mortgage application. But his spending patterns didn't match that income, not even close. I found transactions to offshore gambling sites, cryptocurrency purchases, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, expensive restaurants where the portions couldn't possibly have been for just business meetings. Then I found the money laundering. David worked in corporate sales, but he wasn't just selling products. He was doing something else, something he'd carefully hidden. I found emails in his work account that discussed kickback arrangements with suppliers, inflated invoices, shell companies that existed only on paper. He was stealing from his employer. I created another spreadsheet detailing every fraudulent transaction, every dollar that moved through the system in ways that violated federal law. I documented dates, amounts, recipients, and the paper trail he'd left. It was a 3-year pattern of systematic theft, and it painted a picture of a man drowning in debt and desperate for money. The gambling losses alone totaled over $130,000. The money spent on Sophia, hotels, restaurants, jewelry, trips to places I'd never been, totaled another $90,000. He'd stolen approximately $120,000 from his employer through fraudulent schemes. In 3 years, David had spent or lost over $300,000 that he shouldn't have had, money that came from 2 places: the inheritance I'd trusted him with, and the criminal acts he'd committed at his job. By the time I'd finished gathering evidence, I had a folder 3 inches thick: certified documents, bank statements, screenshots, notarized records, email printouts. This wasn't a divorce file. This was a criminal indictment wrapped in financial analysis. I found a lawyer named Mr. Chen. Not the flashiest attorney in the city, but the one with a reputation for turning financial evidence into courtroom victories. Our first meeting lasted 3 hours. I laid out my spreadsheets and my documents and my timeline. He didn't say much. He just sat there reading, occasionally adjusting his glasses, making notes. When he finally looked up at me, he had a strange expression on his face. It was respect mixed with something else. Maybe pity. "In 20 years of practice," he said slowly, "I've never seen a case this thoroughly documented. You didn't just gather evidence. You built a narrative. You made numbers tell a story." "The numbers always tell a story," I replied. "Most people just don't know how to read them." He smiled. "We're going to destroy him in court, and he won't even see it coming." We prepared for 6 weeks. Mr. Chen taught me how to present complex financial information in simple language. He coached me on courtroom demeanor. He warned me that David would try to intimidate me, to make me doubt myself, to break my composure. "When he realizes what's happened," Mr. Chen said, "he'll go through all the stages of a drowning man. First anger, then denial, then bargaining. Your job is to be a stone wall, Don't react. Don't show emotion. Let him destroy himself with his own words. The morning of the hearing, I put on a navy blue dress. Professional, calm, powerful without trying to be. I pulled my hair back neatly. I applied minimal makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who knew the truth, and the truth was on her side. David arrived at the courthouse in an expensive suit, looking confident. He was almost giddy. He actually believed he was going to win. He believed his charm and his expensive lawyer would be enough. He still didn't understand that I'd spent 3 months documenting his entire life. When he saw me in the hallway, he actually laughed. He came toward me with that smug expression I'd come to hate. "Today is the best day of my life," he said, loudly enough that people waiting for other cases could hear. "I'm taking everything, Jasmine. The house, the money, everything. You're going to walk out of here with nothing." He introduced the woman next to him, Sophia. She was prettier than her Instagram photos. Younger. She looked at me with open disdain as if I were already erased. "Don't worry about her," Sophia said, linking her arm through David's. "We'll find a nice place for her to live, maybe an apartment downtown. We need your beautiful home to renovate, baby. I want to redo the whole thing." I didn't respond. I didn't cry or get angry. I simply looked at them both and then looked away. Just like Mr. Chen had taught me, this seemed to infuriate David. He wanted me to break. He wanted drama. Instead, he got silence. In the courtroom, David's lawyer, a man named Bradley who clearly believed his own press, immediately took charge. He spoke about how David had been the provider, how he'd built the life they lived, how I was just a housewife trying to cash in on his success. Then Mr. Chen stood up, and he introduced the evidence. He started with the house. He showed the inheritance documents. He showed the original down payment. He showed every single mortgage payment I'd made, documented with the memo line I'd been intelligent enough to include. He showed the certified bank statements, proving that my inheritance had paid for the down payment, and that I'd been the primary contributor to the mortgage for 3 years before we were even married. David's lawyer suddenly looked nervous. Then Mr. Chen moved to the spending patterns. He laid out the gambling losses, detailed transaction by transaction. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, money that disappeared into offshore betting sites, then the jewelry, the hotels, the trips. He introduced Sophia's Instagram posts as evidence. He showed how David's spending patterns aligned perfectly with the beginning of his relationship with Sophia. Finally, he showed the fraudulent transactions at David's job. He produced emails, invoices, shell company records, kickback calculations. He showed that David's true income wasn't the $160,000 he'd claimed. It was approximately $290,000, because that was what he was actually spending. The judge's expression changed from neutral to grimly interested. David's lawyer tried to interrupt. He tried to object, but he had nothing. He had words. We had numbers. The judge asked David directly if he contested any of the financial evidence. He couldn't, because it was all true. Every single number matched up perfectly. Mr. Chen then made his recommendation. Due to the evidence of dissipated marital assets, the gambling losses, and the money spent on an affair, the house should be awarded entirely to me, as my inheritance had funded the down payment and I'd been the primary contributor to the mortgage. The personal savings accounts should be split equitably, with Jasmine receiving a larger share as compensation for the dissipated assets. The court also recommended that the evidence of fraud be turned over to law enforcement for investigation. The judge agreed with all of it. As the judge was explaining her ruling, I watched David's face change. I watched him understand, moment by moment, what had happened to him. He'd walked into that courtroom confident he was going to win. He walked out bankrupt, unemployed within hours as his company learned of the fraudulent schemes, and alone. Sophia left him in the courthouse hallway. She didn't even wait for the verdict. The moment she realized there was no money coming, she simply walked away. David had nothing, no house, no money, no job, and a massive legal problem waiting for him. I walked out of that courthouse into the afternoon sunlight, and for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. The victory wasn't in the money or the house. The victory was in reclaiming my life. The victory was in proving to myself that I was strong enough to do what needed to be done. That night, I sat in my house, and I allowed myself to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief, tears of freedom. The next morning, I woke up in the home I'd helped build and realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't the woman who'd cooked dinners for a man who didn't appreciate her. I wasn't the woman who'd closed her eyes to the truth because it was easier than facing it. I was a woman who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't anger or revenge. It's simply the truth presented clearly, backed by evidence that can't be denied. 6 months later, I ran into David at a grocery store. He looked like a ghost of himself. Thinner, older, lost. He tried to talk to me. He apologized. He said he'd made mistakes. He asked if there was any chance for us. I looked at him and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness, just empty space where love used to be. "The numbers never lie, David," I said quietly. "And the bill always comes due." I turned away and continued shopping. Behind me, I heard him collapse onto a bench, his entire body shaking. That's the thing about numbers. They're honest in a way people never are. They don't care about your excuses. They don't care about your intentions. They just show you what's real. I rebuilt my life after that. I started my own auditing firm. I helped other women understand their finances, to never be blindsided the way I was. I learned that being an accountant wasn't just about balancing books. It was about seeing the truth of people's lives written in figures and facts. And I learned that the greatest power isn't in the courtroom victory or the money or the house. It's in standing in your own power, knowing the truth, and refusing to be defined by someone else's lies. The numbers had spoken, and they always tell the truth.